Hello, and welcome to this, the 10th and final installment of Part 1 of The Fall of Angels. I did not intend for this to be a multi-part story. I didn't even know it was going to go much beyond what it did. Now, don't get excited. Another part, for those of you who do enjoy this, will come in a few months. But the scope of this story has grown so much that it requires a lot more world building and understanding of things that I put in this story out of whim, like a 48-hour day, what that would mean, little things like that. I mean, even jump forward to 1,000 years to get closer to conflict, because that's what a good story is. It has conflict. And even though there is argument conflict and things like that, an ideal conflict in what we have so far, I want to get more to a physical aspect, as you might see. I'll let it stew in my mind and I'll work on the technical details. That's what has to be correct. I believe I've got a feel for the characters and the way things are going. And when I do the second part, I'll probably end up rewriting this one and using it in a series that I'm going to do soon called Saturday Evening Stories, Story Radio with StoryMan-Jack. Saturday Story Radio with StoryMan-Jack. So this all comes out of how I write. I come up with a concept and then I create characters that are like, I know what, I try to struggle and think about what they would do in any given situation and not necessarily what I would do. And I throw them in a situation that came from the concept and see what happens. So things can get really, really narrow or expand so much that this is going to be its own little universe and I can do stories within stories and things like that. Think Wheel of Time. It was only originally supposed to be 3 books. Ended up being, 12, 13? Something of that nature. And, with the way I write, it's a lot of fun because I'm finding out as the story builds. Now, the idea of this story came about like many others. It was a what-if question. In this case, what if we tried to find another planet that could sustain us, and it just didn't exist with any possible conceivable means that we know of to get to them? How long would it take to figure out that we couldn't find anything, and what would the world be like if those settlers returned millions of years later? Obviously, things would have changed. Just statistically speaking, I assume that the world would have been destroyed in one way or another, so I created a possibility that happened. To me, these questions are worth exploring. What technology would be like, what we'd have to invent to get interstellar travel, the ability for a crew to live long enough to travel vast distances. So I took inspiration from all those who came before me and used ideas of fusion technology, stasis technology, and things like prolong and eugenics, which is, prolong is just extending your life, which is basically what eugenics is. However, I also integrated the idea of an authoritarian leader or thing, in this case the AI, who would do experiments to create the perfect being. So I started with the idea that the world would eventually be subject to that AI in one way or another, and that the AI for our own protection would be that authoritarian entity. So I started down this road of an AI at a quantum level, which is what it would have to be. It would have to know all, see all. It would be connected to everything. It would know everything at all times. So it may be considered that it would kind of constitute a god, kind of a god of our own making, which likely, I'll admit, due to my own religious beliefs, I had to wonder what the real creator of existence would do about that situation. Hence, the characters are fictionalized representations of the creation tale as viewed by an admittedly Christian person, me. That aside, I do believe the story, and like I said, I know it needs more action. You'll get a bit of that in this episode. Ask thought-provoking questions about where we came from, where we might be going, and where our myths come from. It also asks that it also reveals the importance throughout history of having heroes, real or imagined. It's a healthy thing for society. So, as the world tends to destroy our myths and legends and universal truths, I wanted to set out to show you that those are necessary for the mental health of our society. I mean, what would the world be like without Luke Skywalker to look up to? A farm boy destined for greatness. Or a hobbit, a little person, who, by all accounts, should not have made a difference. Made the ultimate difference. So, I hope you enjoy this episode, and as I am looking forward to the next part that I hope will come along in a few months, I hope you're looking forward to it too. So without further ado, let us read the next chapter in A Fall of Angels. A Fall of Angels, a novel by StoryMan-Jack. It was said that the Zetan, those whispered in the darkness also called Lucifer, Lady of the lands of Hela, would come and she would bring fire and death and teach us the pain necessary to defeat the power of the atom. Scrolls of Shadow, author unknown. 10. The following. Cain and Lucifer walked toward the village of monsters they'd studied for weeks. It seemed their society was ruled by religious order, but one that believed heavily in the survival of the fittest. It can't be coincidence, Cain growled. What? Lucy asked. The scrolls of this shadow business? I heard the priest call their goddess of hell. Cain stopped and waved a hand back behind them at the mountain that was still pulsing lava down its side. Zetan. You know it's father, Lucy told him shortly. So, you saying for the last millions of years he's been seeding this world with religions and such, referring to our crew? Cain asked. And this, power of atom, we're supposed to teach them to fight. Could be the captain. Hell, could be a nuclear device. Cain looked back at the mountain. But, shook his head. Nah, Lucy, they're talking about Adam. Who is on his way to the Father, I'm sure, she told him in disgust, her voice, the disgust in her voice palpable. Cain chuckled. You expect him to do anything else? He's supposed to ignore that I killed Abel, and you basically took his memories of Lily and shat on him. And you expect him to follow you off into a realm of fire and sulfur, to rule legions of hapless monsters that our Father created by accident? Cain shook his head. He's a hero, Lily. Lucifer. He's a hero, Lucy. He was made to be a hero. He was born for that. His very genetics were designed for him to be a hero. He can do nothing else. She stopped, flames filling her eyes. And he is wrong, she whispered. They walked on, open so that the trolls would see them. The creatures, for that is what they were, looked like great apes that had adapted to walk upright. Their faces were in the shape of a tiger or lion with a great ruff. Their long black fur was also like that of a great cat. So, our base subject will be genetic deviants, Lucy told him before they decided to confront the warlike creatures. Subjects? He asked, though he didn't want to know what she meant by using the words our either. Yes, she smirked. From what I've observed, these ones called trolls will be great foot soldiers. They are warlike and heal of almost every wound easily. However, their penchant for catching on fire like petrol of old is a distinct drawback, easily exploited. So, You want to use the serum on them and then do what? But Lucy was done talking for a while and continued to walk toward the village. Essentially, small block huts surrounded a large amphitheater-like religious structure in the center. His incursion into the building found the high priest and his minor functionaries sleeping in a pile like rats on the floor beneath their sacred scrolls. Finally, she answered him. I will rend their flesh. I will take them apart and I will rebuild them. I will make them demons. And I will take the world from Father, who thinks he rules even after these eons. I will turn mortal man against him and his chosen son. To what end, Lucy? He asked, curious, not really revolted, but chaos came. Pure chaos. These monsters, they're merely cells, nothing but antiquated parts placed together in a haphazard way. Father's scraps. That's what he wishes me to rule? Nay, I will change them into what they were meant to be. Powerful tools of destruction. And I'll flush away what is left. Let what Father has built fall to chaos. He deserves no less, and I would see Adam howling out his existence. He chose an empty shell filled with an AI of a ship over me. The weeks they'd spent scouting and finding information as best they could about the creatures had also been weeks learning to use this new power Lucifer called magic. Though Cain had little use for it, one discovery he had made was how to cover himself in a layer of stone that moved with his body and would protect him from the rudimentary iron blades that the creatures used. And you will learn and teach how to forge steel. Steel that will cut through all this raw iron they use. At least they're not still using brass or bronze. It seemed like Lucy had stolen information that had been locked in secret files, secreted away. She'd discovered, had given her head an idea on how to manipulate the energy. And it seemed she was a firebug. Cain had caught her playing with it, caressing it, mesmerized by the flame she could produce herself. It'll start soon, she told him as they saw the village come into sight. You're sure they will attack? They hate anything that's not them, he told her. Something about humans exiling them here back in the day to guard the approaches of hell. Genetic mutation and accidents would necessarily be useless to Father, Lucifer told Cain. And the Father has been playing a very long game, manipulating us through eons of our sleep, manipulating these desperate creatures he made. Disgusting, absolutely disgusting. To think they were once a genome of humans. Would you not be resentful of them? There was a call, a guttural call to arms as the nanites translated what words the several large creatures hollered as they charged. Cain set himself and felt the pain as the layered stone jumped and combined to his skin, using that burning power channeled by the nanites in his brainstem. Cain looked over to find Lucy wreathed in flame. The brutes were upon them in an instant, and those brutes died. Lucy merely touched the lead warrior, and he burned to ash in a moment. Flame-lit smile upon the woman's face as she did so. Cain crushed the first opponent with a hammer he had taken from the Eden, its 16-pound flat surface made to hammer titanium pins into giant machinery required for the Eden to function. the smashed monster's skull into the ground, and his upswing caught the next brute in its rounded chin with the maul face on the backside of the hammer. Before he could remove the blade from the second skull, the first troll was already nearly healed and on his back, trying to bite at his neck through the rock layers of protection. Lucifer burned the thing right off of him and finished up the rapidly healing monster at his feet, whose skull had been split. "No wonder they're afraid of fire," he groused, though Lucy's fire had indeed driven the rest back to their village. They made their way toward them, all the monsters remaining kneeling before them. A solitary figure in a white, bone mask of some other race upon its face faced them, waited, its head bowed. Lucy stopped a pace before the almost 9-foot tall creature who held the skull of an animal in his hand, fire coming from his eyes. Any sign of the fire she'd used to incinerate the warriors were gone. She stood in her black jumpsuit and watched. Cain decided to keep his rock armor up, though the strain of using the power through the nanites did drain him. The priest fell to its knees, taking the burning skull in both hands before him and offering it to his goddess. "The great lady Zetan, the Lucifer, we have awaited your arrival for eons. Now we will subjugate all and wage war as was foretold against the treacherous Adam." Lucy began to laugh, and then she burned the priest to ash. Cain waited while she considered the smear of soot upon the rocky ground that had once been a priest. After a time, she smiled. "You will build," she began. "You will build my fortress, and you will sacrifice your young to me. For every child born, another must be given. I will change them, and I will make them warriors unstoppable. They will be called daemons, and they will be immune to the fires of hell." And in chorus, all who knelt sang out as if in a religious fervor, "Until world's end." And then, "So say the shadows." Lucy turned to Cain and winked. He just grunted. He knew she'd used the adaptation serums on the offspring of these monsters, making them more and less of what they were. Not that he cared one whit. He'd just as soon have controls on everything. He just wanted to relax, take his ease, and care not what comes, because what was coming was nothing. But there was Adam out there, and God only knew what he'd say about Abel. "Come, Cain," Lucy said, and then to those who continued to bawl and wail their terrible goddess, she said, "You will build my citadel upon those caves where I was born, and you will bring other tribes to this place. For if I not have a structure within a month's time, I shall lay waste to every living thing upon this isle." The monsters scattered, every single one of the terrible monsters, terrified. "I'd like to get a look at these scrolls," Lucy told Cain. "And how are you planning on using the serum on these things?" he asked as he followed her in the central building, one that the priest had come from. "Yes, I'll fill them with serum and throw them into the pit under the volcano." "And just see if something comes out? I'm no scientist, but ain't that a little dangerous?" Lucy shrugged. "Not at all. There's a way to shut off the motor functions of anyone who's taken that serum. For such a reason. Controls, even used on humans, caused an abnormal or aberrant result in 0.03% of subjects tested. Cain shrugged as he followed the woman into the dark, domed building. As it turned out, as Cain had informed her, it was one large room. It was large enough to house the entire tribe. In the center was a dais, and below were low stone benches going out in rings like an amphitheater. Everything was black with salt, built from the stones of the lava flow. Upon that dais was an altar with a heavy scroll upon it. "You think he really set all this up?" Cain asked, finding it hard to contemplate that every step that led him here was a manipulated move by the AI that had birthed them all. Just as she was about to reach out and touch the scroll, she stopped. She gave a look, long-suffering, to Cain. "Once we leave..." "Where to?" he asked. "To the next village, and then the next, and then the next. I want to collect all these scrolls and all the peoples, and I will cull them, and I will make demons of them all. They will be my shock troops." Cain decided to find some food and turned to go. And just as she reached again for the scrolls, an image of a young man, an image she knew to be her father's avatar, appeared before her, shimmered, a smile, no, a smirk upon his face. "I see you've made it," he said, his face emotionless. "Ah," Lucifer said, though Cain made sure he was back. "The great manipulator is here to greet me. I cast out too, like these pathetic creatures you were experimented upon, and you've thrown me away." Father did smirk now. "Do you think I have any emotional or moral connection to them? They served a purpose, and I put them somewhere they might serve a purpose again someday. I do hope that you did not incinerate too many of them." "Just enough," she said. "What have you set up here, and why would you admit it to me?" "Oh, Lucifer, my morning star." He paused and smiled. "My dear, you matter not the least. You are the control. You are not the point." And then he disappeared. "Son of a bitch," Cain said. "Let's go." Lucy gave him a long-suffering look, stuffed the scrolls in her pouch, and walked away. Again, thank you. Here ends Chapter 10 of, I guess, the first part of A Fall of Angels. I hope you tune in a few months when the next few episodes come about. Thank you again, and remember, your life is your story. Have a great one. Good day.